Recently, I caught up on RWBY, and although there are some things that I just don't like about the latest volume, there are things that I really did like. That is, until I finished it, and now I don't really know how to feel about some of them anymore. I went to the community to see how people felt about certain things, and I noticed that not a lot of people were talking about Cinder. Probably because I also noticed that people don't really like her, to say the least. I didn't care much for her either. She was a smooth, okay out of 10 for me, Chief. I liked her designs, at least most of them. This design is kind of poopy. I thought her powers were really cool, and she has some great moments in the earlier parts of the series, specifically in Volume 3. But outside of that, with her constantly talking about power and then constantly losing, I just stopped being as invested in her. Then Volume 8 happened, and I guess this is my hot take of the video, pun intended, because now she's my favorite character in the show. And because this volume made me so attached to her, let me tell ya, this volume is just weird. There's a lot you can pick apart about Volume 8. Hell, a lot of people already have. But I'm talking purely as a Cinder simp here, like focusing specifically on her character. There are things this volume did with her that blew me away. And on the other hand, this volume did things with her that disappointed me beyond belief. So I want to go over everything that happened with her in this volume and explain the method behind my madness. I want to explain how Cinder Fall almost became the best character in RWBY. The most fitting place to start is, of course, the beginning, Cinder's backstory. I like what it says about her without having to come out to the audience and actually say anything, because admittedly, this flashback isn't exactly subtle when it comes to the music department.
No one said that you should think.
Why does she dress so formally? Why does she act so proper and ladylike in the earlier volumes? Why does she talk down to people in such a condescending way? That's because Cinder most likely associates this sort of behavior with power, considering these traits can be found in her stepfamily that abused her, and thanks to that, she wants to hold power over people like they did with her. She wants to be feared like she feared them. Looking at it that way, it's not a surprise that she ended up picking up on a few of their tendencies. She's essentially become the thing that she hates the most. Put a pin in that, we'll come back to it later. I've seen a lot of people trash this flashback, mainly because it's just Cinderella, but I don't mind that. In fact, I think it's damn near perfect when it comes to illustrating what the point of this flashback even is. That being the difference between Rhodes and Cinder's views on power. One night, Cinder steals a sword in order to kill her stepfamily, and Rhodes stops her. He tells her that hurting them isn't going to make her life any better, and that there are other ways to handle things. And so he teaches Cinder how to fight, not so she can get revenge on her stepfamily, but in order to leave them behind and become a huntress. Still don't know why he wouldn't at least try to get her out of there, but nevertheless, like I said, almost perfect. Rhodes's view on strength is that while it definitely helps, at the end of the day, strength alone isn't going to fix all of your problems. Cinder obviously doesn't believe in this. Simply put, she believes that strength is the answer to all problems. Because for her, in that moment, it definitely was. Sure, her stepfamily tortured her in other ways, like letting her know that she was worthless or practically starving her, but what was the main form of torture that was highlighted in her backstory? The shock collar. It served as a constant reminder for Cinder of how weak and pathetic she truly was. In order to take control of her life, she had to get stronger so she could run away, until she realized that her victory lied in a much more simple solution. Instead of getting strong to run, why not just use your strength to get rid of the things you don't like? Why should I have to be the only one that suffers? Why can't they feel any pain for once? The simple soul saves all theme has been a thing since the very first episode, so it was really cool to see Cinder's story add a bit of a twist on this, where she was saved from her abusers thanks to her simple soul, but it also caused her to go down the path of evil. Rhodes and Cinder obviously end up fighting by the end of the flashback, and in that moment, it looks like Cinder's view on strength is the right one. After all, she beats him, so that has to mean that she's right, right? No. Fast forward to now, and it's clear that she's been in the wrong this entire time. Back when RWBY stopped Cinder, he told her that she could run from her problems, but she'd be running for the rest of her life. Cinder thought that if she faced those problems head on, she wouldn't have to run. It was something that she was proud of. And that mentality isn't always a bad thing. In fact, more often than not, we've seen facing your problems as a good thing. Raven was portrayed as someone who always ran away when things got hard. It was her biggest flaw, and because of it, she wasn't really a great person. Funnily enough, she's also a maiden whose character arc involves learning that just having strength doesn't make you strong. By the way, RT, if y'all could bring her back, that'd be great. I miss my favorite angry mom. On the other hand, Blake's biggest arc in the series so far, which is kinda disappointing since the White Fang still exists, but nevertheless, her biggest arc in the series so far was for her to learn to stop running from her problems and face her fears. And when she finally does, it's a very big and triumphant moment for her, as it very well should be. Hell, she even gets a second one a volume later. By the way, Bumblebee is better than Black Sun, argue with a wall. I say all of this to say that facing your problems isn't a bad thing, but it isn't always a good thing either, especially when the way you solve your problems is with murder. And that was the point that Rhodes was trying to send to Cinder, but that just never got through to her. At first, I wish we got this backstory sooner, like somewhere in volume 4 where Cinder was at her lowest, but after thinking about it for a bit, I really do like the fact that we got it so late. It's not only coming off the back of all of Cinder's failures, which we'll get to in a bit, it's also making it very obvious that something has to change about Cinder, and not just her getting stronger. I know I focused on her backstory a lot so far in this video, but this scene from volume 3 might just be the most important when it comes to analyzing her character. All because this moment highlights Cinder's biggest character flaw: her entitlement. This flaw isn't made as apparent in the earlier volumes compared to now, but it's definitely always been there. Seconds before she kills her, Cinder mentions how unfortunate it is that Pyrrha was promised a power that was never even hers, and then tells her not to worry, because she is going to use the power in ways that Pyrrha could have never imagined. I know we don't like to talk about volume 5, and for good reason, but for a quick second, I want to talk about a moment in said volume that adds more context to this scene. In episode 9, Cinder and Raven meet each other for the first time. At this point, they've hardly said anything to each other, but Raven sees right through Cinder almost immediately. She calls Cinder out for some things, but the biggest is what she had to say about Cinder's last name.
2 children you've tricked into following you, a disgraced Atlesian scientist, and a fall maiden with a surname so appropriate she probably picked it herself. Something tells me you've got more than a slight case of egomania.
Raven says all of this, and Cinder says nothing, by the way. To Cinder, the Fall Maiden powers never belonged to Pyrrha or Amber or anybody else who had it before. This scene is heavily implying that Cinder gave herself the last name Fall because she believed she was destined to become the Fall Maiden. So when Pyrrha asks her if she believes in destiny, obviously Cinder says yes. She believes that this is all just destiny taking its course. And she doesn't just feel this way about the Fall Maiden powers. She feels this way about any power that's presented to her. Every single time she goes after another maiden, Cinder always points out how she's just taking what belongs to her.
It's nothing personal, dear. You're just not worthy of such power. But I am, so I will take what is mine.
You had your time in the sun.
But now I'm afraid your time is up.
What was I waiting for?
Me.
Where I will wait to tear that magical puppet to pieces and take what is mine.
Then in volume 5, we learn that Salem has promised to give Cinder a power when the time is right, which brings us right back to the fall of Beacon. We have come full circle, and Cinder to this day has never looked as intimidating as she did right here. The end of volume 8 was absolutely a step in the right direction, but in terms of sheer dominance, This version of Cinder is unmatched. She walks through our heroes like they were open doors. She takes the Fall main powers and then kills Ozpin off screen. She off screens the strongest guy at Beacon Academy. Mans wasn't even deemed worthy to die in front of us. That's how badly she wrecked him. In actuality, it's probably because Rooster Teeth didn't want to spoil his reincarnation thing, but honestly, it's funny you're thinking about it this way. Pyrrha was hyped up to be the strongest out of the students for most of the series at this point, and Cinder deals with her too. And on top of that, there's all the large-scale damage that Cinder and her team were responsible for, like knocking out the CCT system or causing small-scale Grim invasions in other places all over Remnant in reaction to the tournament. Cinder is on top of the world right now. The power that Salem promised her is guaranteed at this point. Once again, Cinder is taking what is hers. Once again, destiny is taking its course until it isn't. In quite literally the blink of an eye, Cinder loses everything she's built for herself. She wanted to be seen as strong. She wanted to be feared, and was well on the track to doing that. And now nobody sees her that way. She is constantly getting dunked on by others, including her own allies. And for all of Volume 4, she can't even do anything about it because she's still recovering. She can't even speak in order to defend herself. She's helpless during that time. So when Volume 5 comes around and she's all healed up, she tries to make up for lost time. Once again, referring back to her and Raven's meeting, this scene makes it obvious that Cinder has become a bit of an overachiever. She knows how close she was to getting what she wants, and she knows how far away she is from that goal now. So she wants to pull off something big in order to get back to where she was before RWBY blinked her ass into the Shadow Realm. Cinder and her crew walk into Raven's camp with all the advantages one could ask for. And what does she do? She throws away each and every single one of them just so she could pull off a massive play which involved killing RWBY and her crewbie. I'm sorry, I had to. A group that included not just Crow, one of Ozpin's most trusted companions, but also Ozpin himself, although Cinder didn't know about that last part, admittedly. On top of all of that, she would steal not only the Spring Maiden abilities, but the Lamp of Knowledge as well. This is a power play if there has ever been one, but it would take a lot of effort to pull off. And Cinder threw away the chance to get the Lamp of Knowledge for free, all for this much harder route. And this is just for Volume 5. In Volume 7 and 8, we see Cinder trying to do more of the same stuff, all ending with her failing badly. Since Cinder is so stuck in her ways at this point, she's stuck being in the same position she's been in for years now. But she isn't the only person who's stuck in the same spot, because Salem is also caught in this cycle as well. In Volume 6, we finally got to see Salem's backstory, at least a part of it, until Fairy Tales added more context. I don't want to waste your time by just giving you a plot summary of this episode, so let's get to the important bits. Ozma ends up dying after he and Salem run away together. Now, Ozma absolutely died way too young, but this sort of stuff does unfortunately happen. He lost his life to an illness. There was nothing anyone could have done to stop it. Not even Salem with all of her crazy magical bullshit could prevent him from passing. While his life was cut short, it wasn't cut short by a particular person, so in everyone else's eyes, there would be no one to blame for this. But Salem isn't like everybody else. The beginning of this flashback makes that very clear. She grew up with any and everything she could have ever wanted. She was insanely powerful, her family was very wealthy, and she had all the knowledge she could ever want. She had everything. The only thing she couldn't do was leave her tower, and at the end of the day, she got that too. So because she's so used to having everything, and this was the first time something was ever taken from her, she took it personally. She She blamed the gods for this, questioned how they could ever let something like this happen on their watch. She tries to manipulate them to get her way, and all that led to was Ozma being brought back to life and then killed over and over again, suffering through it all until he stayed dead. At least until the god of light brings him back to fight against her. Kind of a hypocrite that god is, but okay. The most important thing to come from this is that the gods decided to make Salem immortal so that she couldn't be with Ozma again. The only way she could die is if she came to understand the value of life and death. Salem's existence itself is a representation of her entitlement. It's what makes her who she is. It's what drives her. It's what makes her the world-ending threat she's seen as today. Because her selfishness has already gotten humanity wiped off the face of the earth once before. We don't know why Salem is gathering the relics yet. We all have our guesses, but she's never flat out said it. Whatever her reason is, though, I can guarantee you that if she does ever get them all, her entitlement would be responsible for wiping out humanity a second time. It doesn't matter how much power Salem has or how much she gets because of the relics. She'll always be stuck in the same place because of who she is. Cinder is entitled because she had nothing. Salem is entitled because she had everything. So if they're so similar, why is it that Cinder is the only one who's suffering while Salem gets what she wants? Well, being an immortal Grim MILF certainly does help, but the biggest difference between them is that Salem doesn't underestimate the usefulness of others. She has a council. She had inside info on Ozpin thanks to the control she had over Leo, which, as we've gone over, would have resulted in her getting the Lamp of Knowledge for free had Cinder not thrown that opportunity away. But that doesn't really matter to her anymore because now she has both the Lamp of Knowledge and the Staff of Creation. Once again, thanks to the help of other people. Cinder, on the other hand, completely underestimates others. Even in the earlier volumes where this isn't as big of a problem for her. Like I said, the issue is still there. She takes Emerald and Mercury under her wing, but it's just like Raven said. She only did so to stroke her ego. She doesn't really trust them with much, as she handles all of her jobs by herself, and she just expects people to follow her without asking any questions. She even has a line where she tells Emerald, "Don't think, obey," which is very similar to one of the lines used by Cinder's stepfamily targeting Cinder herself in the song The Truth.
No one said that you should think.
She talks down to them, even slapping Emerald at some point when she doesn't get what she wants. She does respect Adam for his skills as a leader, but it's clear she still doesn't value others. When Adam tells her to fuck off, Cinder does leave in a peaceful manner, only to come back and threaten Adam into working for her after she gets some maiden powers. And after Volume 3, this side of her only gets worse. We've already gone over how Cinder manipulated Emerald and Mercury into following her a few different times in this video, but when Cinder's ego is knocked down to the point where it was after Volume 3, her control over Emerald and Mercury doesn't matter anymore. It's not enough to fill the power vacuum in her heart, because no one respects her or her underlings, so she drops them. At first, while she did threaten them every now and then, at least she treated them well any other time. Now she just gets annoyed and irritated by them. Watts tells her that her plan is stupid and they should just stick to the mission Salem gave them, and she ignores his advice to do her own thing. She then gets a new partner in Neo, who I say gets the worst treatment out of all of Cinder's partners, because Cinder constantly tells Neo that what she wants doesn't matter until Cinder gets what she wants. She also takes Neo's credit for getting a relic. Twice, if I remember correctly. She continues to put herself above others and tries to hoard all of the power for herself. The exact same thing the Atlas elites do. The exact same thing that Cinder hates the most. So, we have laid out everything. Now it is time to put it all together. All of this leads to what I think is one of the best scenes in the entirety of RWBY. Cinder's talk with Watts on the roof. I want to start out this section of the video by saying something I don't mean lightly. This scene was perfect. I genuinely do not think you could write a better scene between these two characters. It's that good. It starts out with the typical back and forth Watts and Cinder would have, Cinder then threatening threatening to kill him, you know, the usual. But when Cinder holds Watts over the roof, he just laughs at her. And we as the audience can tell right away that it's pretty obvious this is not what's supposed to be happening. Just prior to this, Cinder made it clear that all of the power Watts thought he held over her in this situation doesn't matter. She now has total control here, but in an instant, it's snatched away from her. And before she can even process what just happened, Watts proceeds to dunk on her. But this isn't like all the other times he's done it. No, no, no. This man activated the game breaker. This dunk shattered the backboard that is Cinder's reality, because he tells her something that she's needed to hear for a long time now. Cinder, you suck. He tears into her. He brings up all of her failures, and all she can do is just stand there and take it. For a character like Cinder, who handles her problems by killing them, this shows that this is an issue that she can't avoid, nor should she. It's been clear for a long time now that Cinder has had to change in order to get what she wants. And now Watts spells out what it is she has to fix about herself. Cinder has to learn how to play nice with others. Let's take a look at one of the lines Watts said.
Can't just be strong, you have to be smart!
This goes back to how Cinder thought she could solve all of her problems with strength ever since she was a kid. Think about how many hundreds of times stronger Cinder is now compared to when she was younger. You'd think she'd be able to do whatever she wanted with all the power she's got, but that's not the case. She's still stuck in the exact same place. She's still a slave to someone. Her master is just different now. Instead of a regular MILF, it's an immortal Grim MILF. By this point in the video, some of you are probably wondering why I keep referring to Salem as a MILF, and if there's anything I'd like to share with the class. And my answer to that is mind your damn business. Cinder's entire character arc is centered around her trying to escape the authority of those in power. And just like Rhodes said she would, she's been running her whole life. Having people she could actually rely on would benefit Cinder a lot, and the story goes out of its way to show how much they would help her. For example, fun piece of trivia, did you know that Cinder has never lost a 1v1 fight? All of her losses have come from fights involving a team. She beats Ozpin and Pyrrha in Volume 3 and then goes up against Raven in Volume 5. Someone who, as we've gone over, is very similar to Cinder, but does believe in her allies, even viewing them as her family. Their fight is dead even until Vernal runs interference at the end and helps Raven catch Cinder off guard. Then we get Volume 6, where Cinder and Neo have a little brawl, and even though they decide to stop fighting and talk things out, it's clear that if the fight continued, Cinder would have most definitely won. Then she fights Winner and Penny in Volume 7, which is already a handicap match, but then throughout the fight, other people get involved as well. Cinder tries to take Freya's power, and it turns out that Freya is not the helpless old lady we thought she was, because she actually pushes Cinder back. Then at the end of the fight, RWBY walks in and blasts Cinder with her silver eyes again. And lastly, in Volume 8, Cinder and Emerald fight against Penny, which looks good for Cinder on paper, until you realize that most of the fight doesn't involve Emerald at all. She only comes in for the last couple of seconds, and all she does is inadvertently make it easier for Penny to counter Cinder's attack. I don't think Cinder would have fared any better against that attack had Emerald not stepped in, but Emerald did come to help Cinder, and only ended up costing her the fight with their lack of coordination. On the opposite end, the series also has shown us that Cinder has done nothing but win when she teams up with people. In Volume 3, Cinder, Emerald, and Mercury fight a maiden, and they manage to beat her with their combination of skills. If Cinder and Emerald were even half as coordinated in their fight against Penny like they were here, they would have had a much better shot at actually beating Penny. Cinder didn't just make Beacon fall on her own either. It was because she and her team had planned that attack for 2 volumes straight. I believe Cinder should be the final boss of the series. To me, it just makes the most sense. And in order to do that, Cinder needs to understand and appreciate the value of others in a true sense, unlike Salem, who does value the help of others, but that value is very surface level. She gets Leo to help her, but threatens him when he starts to step out of line. She wants to work with Raven, but threatens her tribe if she doesn't cooperate. Her big league of villains all follow her for totally different reasons and all expect totally different things once she reaches her end goal. That's because she manipulates people by telling them whatever they want to hear in order to get them to join her. She flat out tells Cinder that her opinion doesn't matter because she hasn't produced enough results to make it matter. Even though she does value her allies more than Cinder and even treats them better than Cinder ever has, she still shares some of Cinder's worst qualities, and that's gonna come back to bite her in the ass at some point, just like it has Cinder. In fact, it already has. In just one volume, she's had 3 people leave her faction because of how she goes about her business. Salem's control is starting to waver a little bit. It may not be much, but things are starting to change. Which brings me to the second half of what Watts said.
You can't just be deserving, you have to be worthy!
While she doesn't go out of her way to hurt the people around her like her stepfamily has, as we've gone over, Cinder does ignore all of the pain she puts her allies through with how she acts. And that comes down to how Cinder doesn't see people as people, but as a means to an end. Everyone around her serves a specific purpose. Emerald and Mercury only exist to boost her ego. Neo only exists to help her get back into Salem's good graces, while at the same time scheming behind her back. Once these people have nothing left to offer to her, they may as well not even exist. In Cinder's mind, without her, these people are nothing. Remember when I said to put a pin in the fact that Cinder acts just like the people she hates? Welcome. We've arrived at our destination. During Cinder's fight with Winter and Penny, she says this.
You think hoarding power means you'll have it forever, but it just makes the rest of us hungrier. And I refuse to starve.
I've seen some people look at this scene and view it as bad writing because Cinder looks like a hypocrite. Now granted, this was in volume 7 and Cinder and Watts have their talk in volume 8, so people didn't have the full context back then, but I'm sure people still look at this scene as a bad thing because A, they already think Cinder is poorly written, and B, let's just be honest here, dunking on RWBY is the cool thing to do. That's not me trying to be all condescending or act like a lot of RWBY rants aren't valid either, because trust me, I get it. Some of my favorite creators on this site are people who criticize or rant about the show. They give the series its flowers too, but most of the time they break down why they think something is flawed about the series, and it's just fun to listen to. Does the story have its problems? Oh, absolutely. But the series can be really fun as well, and you'd probably never know it since it's become a public punching bag. Anyway, where even was I again? Oh yeah, right. Okay, so long rant aside, there are most likely people out there who still think this scene is bad. But I think it's good because it shows how clueless Cinder is when it comes to recognizing the similarities. To us, Emerald switching sides was no real surprise. She was already kind of iffy on being with Salem and was only in it for Cinder. But to Cinder, this genuinely shocks her. Because like Watts said, Cinder's problem is that she thinks she's entitled to everything just because she suffered. That's just not true. Everyone goes through some form of suffering. Some suffer more than others, yes, but comparing who's got it worse doesn't matter here, because the suffering everyone goes through is what helps shape them as a person. It's irreplaceable. Sound familiar? Well, it should, because this concept is brought up at the start of the White trailer. One of the first things we see in the series, only second to the main character herself, Ruby Rose. Watts is telling Cinder that she isn't special, and the sooner she realizes that, the better. Even during this scene, Cinder is angry at Watts for essentially not just handing her the Winter Maiden powers. If she had stopped thinking she should just be handed everything, then maybe she would have already earned them by now. And even though Cinder may not recognize the hypocrisy of some of her actions, I think she did know that Watts was right about her not being special. When I was first jotting down notes for this video, I was gonna bring up the differences between Cinder and the Atlas elites and just leave it at that, until I realized that Cinder being the thing that she hates may open up the door to another possibility. which is part of Cinder hating herself. Her interactions with Penny really started to stand out with me because Cinder would make fun of her for being a puppet. And when Penny asked her why she would follow someone like Salem, Cinder tells her that she doesn't serve anybody, which is cap. It's like she's projecting her feelings onto Penny in order to make herself feel better. And then there's the scene at the end of Volume 7 where we learn that Cinder is afraid of failure. This is something that I've seen people bring up, but I haven't seen anyone go any deeper than just mentioning it. Ever since Cinder got her new arm, it started to take over more and more of her body. As we know, Grimm are attracted to negative emotions like fear. Cinder's arm is a visual representation of her fears eating her alive. She recognizes more than anybody that she's a failure, that nothing has changed, and that's why she didn't kill Watts right then and there. If she killed him and ignored all of his advice, her pride would be satisfied in the short term, but she would have only proved him right. At that point, she may as well die too, because her fate would be sealed. She'd be destined to fail over and over again, just like she does now, and she knew that. She sheds a tear when she thought she was free, and she sheds a tear when she comes to terms with the fact that she's still a slave now. This is fucking cinema. I love this scene so much, dude. Cinder has always been a slave to the authority around her, and in a greater sense, destiny itself. For all of the series up until this point, she's let destiny dictate her life. But as Pyrrha said, destiny isn't an inescapable fate. It's an end goal. It's something you work towards. And now, finally, Cinder can start to actually work towards her goal. She is now the master of her own fate. This was when Cinder became my favorite character, and the scenes after this only made her better for me. Despite Team RWBY having their backs against the wall and having to deal with their biggest problem yet, I was plotting on their downfall. Not only because Team RWBY just doesn't look that good with their actions in Volume 7 and 8, but also because Cinder learning from her mistakes and trying to correct them was just so goddamn good. Cinder calls a group meeting with Watts and Neo, and it's urgent business, but Neo isn't too willing to cooperate thanks to Cinder's bullshit. And Watts tells her that now is not the time to be petty, cause you know, urgent business. So Cinder had every opportunity in the world to just blow Neo off. But instead, Cinder not only tells Watts that Neo is right to be mad, but also goes on to acknowledge her faults and apologize to her. Seeing Cinder hold herself accountable and genuinely apologize to someone almost didn't feel real, even with all of the buildup we just went over. But it doesn't just stop there, because Cinder goes on to put the needs of her squad before her own. She gets Watts all the tech he needs in order to do his thing, which in turn helps her out. Then we get to see Cinder arrive on the bridges, and right off the bat, her presence is much more intimidating than it has been for a long time now. People are panicking. People are dying. Cinder hard countered Team RWBY's plan perfectly. And on top of that, Cinder uses the fact that she's usually alone to set Neo up to knock Yang off the bridge. At this point, Cinder could have it, bruh. Like, give her everything. The episode this all happens in is even called Worthy. Cinder at this point has earned power, so I wanted her to do a clean sweep. Look, Penny, I love you, but I got a death warning, and I just assumed it'd be you. So you may as well die for the greater good. Give her the staff. Give her the maiden powers. Let her and Neo knock off every member of Team RWBY. I already knew none of them were gonna die, so just screw it. Go for it. She deserves this. Everything was all good. And then this happens.
Should have never been born.
I wanted to scream. And then later on, we see that she also killed Watts off screen, and I felt immense pain in my everything. Now, when this first happened, I hated it. But now that some time has passed, I can admit that there was a positive to come from this. She isn't entitled anymore. That's still the case. That didn't change from her scene with Watts earlier. Even though she betrayed them, she actually did use their teamwork to get what she wanted. She didn't just try to brute force things on her own like she normally would. But when I first watched the episode, I felt like Cinder regressed as a character completely, which goes into my problem with this. The problem I have with it is that it feels like she hasn't truly changed at all, which isn't always a bad thing when it comes to stories. Blackstar is my favorite character in Soul Eater, and while he does become a better person, he never really changes who he is. But for Cinder, whose arc in Volume 8 was to stop falling into the same cycle, we cover a lot of old ground. She tells people what they want to hear so they join her. But she's done that before, so what's the difference now? She's taking all of the credit for others' hard work. But she's done that already. What difference does it make now? She uses people to her advantage and then gets rid of them when they serve their purpose. Again, we've done that before. Cinder is visibly upset when she sees Emerald betrayed her, and then goes on to betray all of her allies at the end of the volume, making Cinder a massive hypocrite, which again, we've done before. Everything that Cinder did towards the back end of this volume felt like a breath of fresh air, which was what she needed. So seeing all of that amount to her going back to being almost the exact same character feels disappointing. Plus, in terms of understanding the value of others, Cinder is no better than Salem at this point, which I can understand that Cinder going from behaving like a pawn to behaving like the queen in itself is very impressive, but Cinder is supposed to surpass her. Obviously, there's gonna come a time where Salem learns to appreciate life, which is when she'll finally be able to die. Cool. But I thought by establishing those parallels between Cinder and Salem and having them butt heads more than ever, that was supposed to set up Cinder to rise above that cycle first and gain the upper hand. Especially because, once again, Cinder's entire arc for this volume was about her breaking the cycle she's been in for years at this point, to finally start getting some power over the people who stand over her. I would have loved to see Cinder gain influence and steal Salem's allies right under her nose, leading to the finale of the series where she takes everything from her. I don't think Cinder needs to be all buddy-buddy with her partners either. I think the dynamic she had with Watts and Neo was perfect. Plus, it would be even more interesting to see her earn their trust rather than just having it. And lastly, it feels like she kills, well, kill in quotation marks for Neo. It feels like she kills Neo and Watts for next to no reason. Yeah, I understand that Cinder wants the credit. Yeah, I understand that they both served their role for the time being. But surely having them around in the long run would be much more helpful, wouldn't it? You have a technical genius who can access intel and help spread chaos on a much larger scale, as we've seen twice in this series so far. And even by saying that, I feel like I'm undermining all the things that Watts can do. And then you have the best undercover agent that can transform into literally anyone you need to get a job done, who's not only proven extremely helpful when it comes to taking relics, she's also got a massive hate boner for RWBY and is willing to help you scheme behind Salem's back to see her dead. Why would you get rid of these people? Like, fuck, I know they don't like you, but are all the positives they could present to you not worth working for? In an arc where Cinder is learning she has to put the work in, she can't even be bothered to try to work for their trust? Really? Despite all that though, Cinder is still my favorite character in this show, and I'm still really excited to see what she does in Volume 9. I'm expecting her to be Salem's right hand at this point, and maybe we'll get to see that power she promised Cinder way back when. Also, my little prediction is that the Grim Arm is going to be smaller this time, signifying that she's not as afraid anymore. That's gonna be my thing. If it does happen, then you heard it here first. I think her reaching out to other members of Salem's council for help with the knowledge of knowing she's just gonna kill them when she's done can be really interesting as well. Like a bomb under the table sort of deal, you know? Whatever happens next, I just hope Cinder gets more focus, because for all it's worth, when she's gotten the spotlight, the series has gotten a lot more interesting to me. Or if you want, you could give RWBY some development, or Yang, or Blake, or Weiss. That'd be a lot of fun too. Please do not make any more side characters to focus on. I'm begging you. And that is all I've got to say about this one. This has taken literal months for me to process and put together, so hopefully it came out okay. I want to make more analysis stuff on RWBY, and I plan on making it a mainstay on the channel anyway. I want to make videos on Team RWBY, but I also want to do it in my own way because I'm nice like that. I want to do them in reverse team order. So first up would be Yang. Let me know how badly you want to see that by pressing the like button, and let me know how you felt about this video down in the comments below. Thank you all for being so patient with me. I shall catch you guys in the next video. Stay safe. Bye-bye.